Great. Welcome, everyone. This is the meeting of the House Progressive Caucus. It is Tuesday, May 2nd, 2023. This is our weekly meeting. We probably have maybe one more, or this might be our final, depending on the schedule of the last week of the session next week. But as per usual, we have a topic today to really explore the challenges and realities facing Vermonters who are houseless at the moment. We'll explore that kind of policy issue and real life challenge and crisis for people in just a couple minutes. But as we usually do, we start with a few logistical caucus updates for our members. And also, would you let me know if any, go ahead. No, hold on a second. And then we'll do introductions of everyone in the room. So we'll start with just the logistical stuff to get that out of the way. Talking to just one official Progressive Caucus member at the moment, but they'll be caught up. So we are in the final 2 weeks, hopefully, of the session. And so our floor schedules do change this time of year. We'll be doing a 10 a.m. and 3 o'clock floor schedule all the way to the end just to keep bills moving, which means we'll recess at some point between 10 and 3 and then pick up business at 3 o'clock. We might have a strong possibility of being here on Monday. Conference committees are starting with bills that there's differences on between the House and the Senate, which is a good thing because those need to get their work done. What else do I want to say? And we anticipate that we'll be bringing back up S5, which is the Affordable Heat Act, before the end of the session for a potential vote, depending on the governor's action on that, which he has sort of indicated he is planning to veto. So, and we had a great training. I'll just wrap up with saying from a trainer from the Conferences of State Governments, I think is what CSG stands for. Council, thank you. That C was wrong. Council of State Governments on bias and bystander training, really around disrupting discrimination and harm and harassment, if you will, within the body of the legislature. And I thought was well done. And if folks have thoughts on that, caucus leaders were asked to collect that information. And that's a fun noise. And give that feedback to our leadership because we're trying to really deepen our training as legislators and make sure there's continual education in that area. So with that, let's go around and do some introductions, and everyone is invited to introduce themselves, and then we'll fold into our topic of the day. So I'm State Representative Emma Mulvaney-Stanek. I represent a portion of Burlington, Chittenden 17, which is about half of the old North End and half of the new North End. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the caucus leader of the House Progressives. And I usually go to my left, as Taylor knows. So Troy will introduce himself when he comes. Sure.
I'm Michelle Boslin. I'm a state representative from Windham County. I represent Westminster, where I live, and Rockingham and Brookline. I use she, her pronouns, and this is my second term, and I serve on the Corrections Committee.
Kathy Partlow. I work at the Family Center of Washington County as the Housing and Community Development Manager there. I think that's it.
Okay, and we'll hear more from you in just a minute. Yeah, thanks.
Hey, hi, everybody. I'm Rick DeAngelis. I'm the co-director of the Good Samaritan Haven. I'll tell you a bit more about them in a few minutes. And I use he, him pronouns.
Thank you.
Sure. I'm Savannah. I'm interning for Representative Rebecca, and I use she, her pronouns.
And I'm State Representative Taylor Small. I also use she and her pronouns, and I represent Winooski and the Assistant Caucus Leader for the Progressive Caucus and serve on the House Human Services Committee. So very well acquainted with this issue, but really excited to elevate this conversation tonight.
Great.
So thank you, everyone. Well, and Troy, hi.
Hi.
Sorry.
Representative Troy Hedrick from Burlington. He and him pronouns work well for me.
Great, thank you. We have a couple other caucus members who might be coming in, and I don't know, is Brian online?
No, it's not yet.
Okay, great. If anyone pops in, though, let me know. Oh, and Alana, who are you?
Hi, I'm Alana Tate from the House Clerk's Office. And I'll just mention the beeping that we hear. I have some people looking into it now, so I apologize. It's a little disruptive.
Well, we know that is not your personal fault, but thank you very much for the help in that. And is it getting picked up on YouTube? Should we pause?
I don't know.
Okay.
But something that we can do about
Sure.
it. It's a building issue. So
Yeah, okay. Well, I think our mics are, well, we'll just keep proceeding because this is the time we have. Okay. And with that said, Representative Small, since you are on the Committee of Jurisdiction, do you want to cue this one up as we dive into our conversation?
Absolutely. So as we're looking at the homelessness crisis in Vermont, I think over the past few years, when we looked at the pandemic, we were granted a lot of federal funds that allowed us the opportunity to keep everyone in housing through our general assistance motel hotel voucher program. And I think we saw this issue coming. We saw it in the fact that the House Human Services and Senate Health and Welfare Committee did an off-session meeting to address the administration's plan to curtail this program earlier in actually last year. And we put in additional funding to continue the program through this year. We saw this fight through the Budget Adjustment Act, where we again extended the program for specific vulnerable populations. And now where we are at is between the House budget and the Senate budget, neither really fully encapsulated and provided well-rounded housing resources for folks within that program. Both tried to look at the other side of the bridge, as we'll call it, of where we are investing in permanent housing, whether that is in motel conversion, manufactured homes, or increasing emergency shelter capacity across the state. But what neither truly addressed was the actual bridge of how we are keeping folks in housing between when this program is ending and when those additional resources are going to be provided within our communities. And so we have folks here today to discuss exactly what the crisis is ahead of us and what our options really are moving forward. Because as we've seen through coverage in Vermont Digger and other sources, there is a lot of confusion. I know even for myself, when the plan for the House budget left, there was this understanding that there were still specific populations that would be covered under the GA motel hotel voucher program. And yet it was upon the Senate's proposal that we all started to learn that actually, no, the administration's plan is that nobody in the program will be housed come July 1st. And so we are, again, I cannot underscore this enough, we are definitely at a crisis point when it comes to housing for folks across our state, not just in long-term solutions, but specifically folks who are experiencing homelessness and continue to experience homelessness.
Thank you, Representative Small. I think that was a great way to cue up our conversation. And one of the things we're really grateful about today is that we have a couple of folks who are really on the front lines of supporting these folks. And we're hoping that we're still going to be joined by a couple of folks experiencing houselessness to round out this conversation. And we'll merge them in as they are able to be here, and hopefully they're on their way. So just to sort of start off with the framing of how either way both of you want to take this, I'm going to give you each about 3 minutes. I'm going to gently time you, but I'll give you a little nod if we hit that timer, if you can't, don't hear it. Just to give us your take on where we are right now, being May 2nd, as we face down the end of the session, and as Representative Small well articulated, this lack of a bridge and the realities facing these folks as of July 1st. So I'm going to I always go to my left. That's okay. Rick?
Makes sense for you to start. You understand our coordinated entry system better than I do.
Great.
As
All
well,
right.
right?
So we'll see how this goes.
Yeah.
So we'll have Kathy get started. So Kathy Parlow is the Housing and Community Development Manager for the Family Center of Washington County. So did I get that right?
You did.
Okay, so why don't you take it away?
Thanks.
Here.
So one of the reasons I'm here is that Kate had asked me if I would address specifically youth homelessness. So I want to just take a slight slant on homelessness in general and talk for just a second about youth homelessness. We work with pregnant and parenting families, so we have a niche. We don't necessarily work with individuals who are homeless most of the time. And youth make up a pretty significant portion of that. It fluctuates over time. And youth experiencing homelessness have a particular set of barriers that don't always exist for other folks. Like they have no housing references. They may have never entered into a lease or been in a housing situation that wasn't in either in a foster home or in their family of origin. And sometimes those aren't so great. Youth experiencing homelessness have a higher instance of ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, which mean that they come from a history of trauma. I would argue that that is probably across the board in homelessness in general, but in particular, youth have experienced that and are closer to the origin of their trauma based on their age. And so the way they express that and what happens in terms of their development is pretty unique. So when we're dealing with what we're dealing with now, which is very low rates of turnover in housing and very little housing available, despite what has been an investment in housing. As you all who do this probably know, being in your own communities, you can invest in housing and that will come to fruition at minimum 3 years from then, and likely even longer out, depending on if it's a larger housing program. So one of the things I just want to highlight in terms of youth is that with the low vacancy rate, with youth having some of those increased barriers, I think we need to find a way to take into account that ending this program so abruptly for them, whether they be pregnant and parenting or not, disproportionately will affect youth in a way that may not affect all other populations. And that's kind of seen time and again with all kinds of social service programs. So the other thing I just want to mention is the lack of a bridge plan that, you were just mentioning. We're feeling it as service providers. I'm also a co-chair of our local housing coalition and sit on another homelessness action team here in Central Vermont. And we are sitting at that table and there is no bridge plan. We don't have money to service those folks. We don't have staff to service all those folks as they walk out. This is going to fall on communities. And it's going to fall on our service providers, yes, but it's really going to fall on communities having to figure out, what are they doing on May 31st or June 31st, June 31st. Like, what is happening? What are somebody bringing a bus and dropping folks off at camping sites? Are there identified camping sites? Probably not. And so these are real community issues. We are feeling the pinch, I would say. I think I can count on Rick in that as well. And we're really concerned about what's going to happen.
Thanks, Kathy. Sombering start here as we dive into this. So let's now hear from Rick DeAngelis, who's the co-director of the Good Samaritan Haven in Barrie, my hometown, by the way. And my dad used to be a longtime volunteer there for many years, so I really appreciate that, having grown up in that community.
Yeah, Good Samaritan Haven was started 35 years ago in Barrie in a single-family house. We still have that shelter. Now we operate 3 shelters. We have a total of 62 shelter beds, and they're kind of different levels, low barrier, somewhat higher barrier, and then we have a recovery shelter now, because we find that the key to helping people experiencing homelessness is to have different options and what fits best for each person in their unique needs. So we have the 3 shelters. We also do winter overflow shelters right here in Montpelier across the street. We have a street outreach team that operates in the county, and we have a site-based program at one of the motels, the largest one, the Hilltop Inn up by the hospital. The shelters are full, and there's people out on the streets. We're all stressed out, and we've got a historically low vacancy rate. What can you say? The social safety net is shredded, in my opinion. And so we don't know how many people are going to be out on the streets. I mean, does anybody know? And we know how many are there now. We've heard that in May, there will be 100. The estimate for Washington County in May is that 100 people will be exited from our county's motels. Then you get to July, and it's just about everybody will be exited. So I found it a little bit disturbing to hear the comments of the chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee saying that Vermonters are resourceful and they will figure this out. I don't believe that. And they are resourceful, but not everybody is going to figure it out and come up with a solution. So there will definitely be people on the street. There will be people camping. I can tell you this, the towns are freaked out around here. I met with fire, police, town managers, and others yesterday. They don't know what the hell to do. Where are we going to bring these people? Other counties are bringing their people up here and dropping them off. So, and so that's the state of affairs. It's pretty simple and pretty awful, I think, altogether. I know that there's been a proposal put forth by our coalition to add, I think, $10 million as part of the conference committee work.
To add it back in, it was stripped.
Add it back in, yes. I fully support that. I find that even a little bit of money, we can do small things that make a difference. We've had funds to pay for nights in motels for the most vulnerable people. Transportation, we just paid for a guy to go to Missoula, Montana, and it was a good solution for him. And it's better than staying here when he's going to get kicked out of a motel. So I guess I'll just leave my comments in that. And if you have any questions, just one other thing that I thought was very chilling, and I don't mean to be completely dark about this because we try to be there with people and support them and care about them. We do our best. But I realized that more people have been leaving our shelters through death and hospitalization than through getting into affordable housing. And I have a long background in affordable housing. I worked for VHCB for 25 years. And that system is so slow in reaching us. It's really frustrating to me, especially because I worked in it for all those years. And we get very, very few units and through the affordable housing system. And I'm not criticizing them or anything like that, but I think we need a more targeted and a direct approach to helping people who have very few supports.
Thank you, Rick. I mean, this is sombering. We need to not be, what's the word? I'm not immune, that's not the right word. Numb, I guess, or whatever opaque to it. And then as legislators, just go back to our communities out of line of sight for people who have that privilege, right? Because it really shows the privilege of legislators if we minimize this crisis that's right in front of us right now. So with that, let's open up for some discussion. Anyone can ask a question or even make comments about where do we go from here with 2 weeks left to go as we face this important issue. Cap, you can certainly speak again, yeah, and then we'll
just quickly to add a couple of the other things that we were talking that we've sent a letter in on. I believe it went in yesterday to the committee that was meeting on this subject. Two of the things that we put in there was that the language should be changed in the bill from I'm not going to get it exact, but from the fact that the state may extend the adverse weather condition timeframe to the state shall extend it. And we put in some suggested dates. I believe it was November 1st or November 15th through April 1. So that was an ask that was put out there. And the other thing that was that we've talked about a lot, both here locally and on a statewide level at some tables that I'm at there, is giving local communities, money and flexibility to use that money to create the continuum locally that makes sense for them locally. And what I mean by that is helping local communities to be able to think outside the box and not just think housing first means every person in their own apartment. Maybe it's renting a large house and allowing 3 or 4 folks to be there and helping to support them in that house. So sorry, I just wanted to say that giving flexibility for local communities to figure it out or help to figure out a piece of it.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Kathy.
No need to apologize. We want you here and we really appreciate your wisdom, both of you, what you're sharing.
We'll go Representative Small. Sorry, now I'm going to my right. Representative Small, then Representative Hedrick.
Thank you. I know in previous years, the administration's plan was exactly what you are highlighting, which is that we need to get rid of the General Assistance Emergency Housing Program in its entirety and move all of the funding and resources into the community, recognizing that it was significantly less money than we were investing in the General Assistance Emergency Housing Program to begin with. So under resourcing our communities to solve an issue that the state itself has not been able to solve. But thinking about that flexibility and recognizing the situation that we're in right now, would you find the Housing Opportunity Program grants to be that flexible funding? I assume that being able to send someone down to Missoula because that's their housing situation, as well as I also hear the more extreme need is even diverting those funds to buying camping supplies right now to be able to get folks in some form of shelter in the meantime.
I don't think we are the largest grantee of shelter funds in the state under the HUB program. I do not find it to be a very flexible program. I find it to be a very rigid program and a bureaucratic program. I don't get it. I mean, at VHCB, we wanted projects to work and we did everything we could to make them work. There's a different mindset in the agency. It's a bureaucracy, it's a state bureaucracy. Good people there and all that, but I find it to be a very rigid program.
Oh, that is very helpful. No, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll probably get into trouble for saying this with Sarah Phillips, but that's just been my perception over 3 years, so.
Well, part of our job as legislators is also to hear the truth of what, again, we want most impacted people to tell us what's happening because we don't want things screamed. We need to make sure that there's accountability on our piece of government. If something's not working through an agency, whatever the topic might be, that is our charge. And this is our moment because we go off session and then anyway, I can go on about the challenges of that. Representative Hedrick. Kathy, did you want to respond to?
Just on the HOP grant versus maybe other funding. Earlier on in the pandemic, in our case, our lead agency, which here is Capstone, had funding that came through the similar process from the state called Rapid Resolution Funds, which were much more flexible, could be used for a bus ticket to get somebody to their grandmother's house in Virginia or wherever. It was much more flexible and could just be case by case basis, up to a certain amount of money. I would say that type of flexibility would be really great again. And I think it came through the same processes, but was not a HOP grant specifically.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a different kind of, yes.
Yeah. Representative Hedrick and then Representative.
I don't know how long I get to call myself a new legislator, but as a new legislator, one of the things that I am taking from this first session, my own reflection is, what do I do when kind of the handwriting is on the wall and where does my resignation of, I guess this is how it's going to be, intersect with what is left for me? Where can I still apply some brakes, or insert some things that need to be, and Kathy, you started getting at this. This to me, and my colleague from Corrections and Institutions will kind of recognize that struggle too, that we've been dealing with as far as prison reform goes. Like, I see the handwriting on the wall. I see myself as one, maybe two of 11 in the room. How much impact can we have? What can we still do, right? And I see ourselves here at that moment, right? The handwriting's on the wall. S100 is about to show up. You started, Kathy. I guess, and we're going to talk, right, about what is our strategy going to be on the floor to kind of keep the important conversations happening. What are your Hail Marys, right? What would you want in the room as those last, like, can we at least get this? Does my question make sense?
Yeah, I think some of the things we mentioned in terms of the asks around language, it's not likely, right? You're getting the $10 million added back in, although we can always be hopeful. But yeah, I think that the pushing for flexibility in communities to be able to do the work and not necessarily throwing the whole emergency housing system back to the communities as was contemplated about 3 or 4 years ago. But flexibility, telling the state that they will maybe expand that housing window, that emergency housing window in the winter, those kinds of things maybe cost money, but it's not the same as saying we want the $10 million.
I think we should really argue for the 10 million. I mean, if not for the homeless, for the towns that are going to be faced with extraordinary costs and problems, I think it's not too much to ask for or to push for.
Let's pause just for a second, just to welcome our additional guests. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. Come on in and please take a seat at the table. Let everyone just have a minute to settle. I really appreciate you being here. We are live on YouTube, just so folks know, as you come in.
If you want to sing or put on a little show.
Do you mind moving down one chair so folks can sit together and we can just move on up, if you will? Thanks, everyone, for being here. So I'm going to just pause and we're going to do another round of introductions just so we can welcome you into the space and give you a second to catch your breath up those stairs and however you got here. So this is the House Progressive Caucus. So we have a weekly meeting, and as we invited you here to help us have a conversation around the crisis that are facing folks who are houseless in Vermont. And we were just having a conversation with a couple of providers who are supporting folks in shelters and elsewhere navigate this, and starting to think through what can we still do what do we still need to do, I should say, as legislators in the final couple weeks of the session. And so let's just do a quick round of introductions so folks know who's in the room. And then what we'd love to do is fold you into that conversation and hear what you all are experiencing for a couple minutes. I'll also name, we unfortunately have to end around 1:15 because we are needed back in the building. So
We will stay as long as we
possibly can.
and some of us who have more flexibility, I invite to stay for some more conversation.
So just very briefly, I'm Representative Emma Mulvaney-Stanek. I represent a portion of Burlington.
I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the leader of the caucus here.
Representative Troy Hedrick, also represent a portion of Burlington. He and him work well for me.
Michelle Boslin. I live in northern Windham County and represent Windham 3 and she, her pronouns.
Kate Logan, I use she and they pronouns, and I represent a part of Burlington as well. And also serve as, in my other job, director for the Vermont Coalition of Runaway and Homeless Youth Programs.
Kathy Partlow, Family Center of Washington County, and she, her pronouns.
Ryan Chena from Burlington. I represent most of the East District and part of the Old North End, Troy's district mate, and I use they, he, or she pronouns, as long as it's respectful.
Sherry Rossi. What was I supposed to say?
Your name.
Do you want to say where you're from?
Oh, I am currently unhoused, and I'm temporarily housed under the emergency housing program at the Hilltop Inn in Berlin.
I'm Brittany Blucas. I'm currently housed in the Hilltop under emergency housing. I'm Brenda Siegel, and I've been going around the state to help folks advocate for themselves.
Rebecca Dupree, currently Hilltop.
Hi, Rick DeAngelis, Good Samaritan Haven. Hi, guys.
Hi.
State Representative Taylor Small, she and her pronouns from Winooski. I'm the assistant caucus leader here today. Thank you all so much for joining us.
We have an intern from another state rep here.
Hi, I'm Savannah.
And
I'm Kate from the House Clerk's Office.
Okay. All right, everyone's back on the same page. All right, so just to fold in, I think what I'm going to just do at this point is because we really want to hear experiences of folks who are literally that we're trying, well, at least this group of legislators are really trying to figure out how to support. So I know we talked a little bit through Brenda around if you're up for sharing a bit of what you're experiencing, your story. I just want to say we have a couple, a few, maybe I'll give you each a couple minutes. You don't have to use all that time, but I'll just gently have a little timer just so we can hear from all three of you. And if you want to pass, totally up to you. So is it Sherry or Cherry?
Sherry, do you mind starting, or would you like to have someone else start?
I actually need a minute, so if we could
Please.
start with somebody else.
Of course.
That's great.
Rebecca?
No, I can.
Okay.
Okay.
It's up to you.
I go based off the same thing.
Yeah, you can. You can go off of whatever's needed.
You take this.
They all spoke at a press conference today, so.
So share what you shared there or share something new. I mean, like, it's really, there's nothing wrong, no right or wrong here. So please.
Okay. So I'll just kind of share the same thing I did at the press conference earlier because that works best for me. Okay, so again, I'm Rebecca Dupree. Some of you, I don't know, may know my name. Yours sounds familiar.
Yeah,
If you're getting my emails.
me too.
Yeah. Okay, so, again, I'm at the Hilltop. Now, public speaking is not my thing, so I'm just gonna go off reading this. But, okay, so, I was an early high school graduate. Starting college, happy, healthy, avid runner. Lived life freely. Actually had hopes for my future then. In the decade following, I worked, traveled, experienced highs, lows. Unfortunately, following the meeting of a partner at the time, my life went into a downward spiral. I found myself in an abusive relationship, like so many. I lost control of my life. I had no choices regarding my own life. I lost everything and I became more isolated because of the abuse. I lost myself in that process. The only good thing that came out of that experience was my 2 children. Although they both are special needs, they have always been my guiding light. In 2018, I got the courage to leave the abuser. I gathered the courage and went out on my own with 2 children, no money, and at that time, no hope at all. That was the beginning of our experience with homelessness. My only mission was to protect my children. Protecting children, I believe 100% should be effortless. There should have been supports available. There wasn't supports available. I quickly found, it's a crash course in learning that, basically. The extreme amounts of stress caused severe health challenges and multiple surgeries. My mental health had been severely affected by both the abuse and homelessness. My body was starting to fail me as well. I walked this path completely alone, no services, no agencies, nothing, by myself. Years passed in and out of shelters. I finally found a place we could call home until the person who had abused me found us and we had to flee again. I've only wanted a safe place for me and my boys to be able to call home. While struggling to keep the faith that we'll one day obtain permanent housing, I decided another change was necessary. This time it was my career. Health and homelessness had become 2 barriers that were too high to overcome. I fought with myself, and I still fight with myself daily to keep moving forward. My children and I were living in the car in park and rides in Chittenden County. I had decided to stop running, and after years of doing so, I decided to travel back to a location here in Washington County where I had previous contacts. I had friends, I had family. I thought maybe it'd be easier to find temporary housing.
And Rebecca, I just want to make sure we hear from the other folks as well. So do you want to just maybe a final thought just for now so we can have discussion that you feel is important to end on temporarily?
Yeah, so overall, I guess, summing it up with everybody's situation being different.
Mm-hmm.
You can't say it any other way than, no matter who you are, the situation, death is inevitable if everybody's thrown on the streets come June 1st, July.
Thank you, Rebecca. Really appreciate it. Brittany or Sherry, do you want to?
Sure.
I'm going to, again, gently time. This is so hard because your stories are so, it's sort of hours of us being able to hear.
Without going into the long version of how I ended up homeless is different than the short version, but the short version is that I lived pretty close to the edge for most of my adult life. I was in a car accident and had cancer in my 20s. Already had 2 children. My husband killed himself in 1997, lost my house, my first house, was eventually able to buy another one that needed a lot of work, and cobbled my life together for a really long time. I was disabled permanently completely in 1988, but I managed to work and didn't collect disability until 2010, when that just became more than I could do. So the next 10 years were trying to live on SSI, which is, it's just really difficult to do. So the last place I lived, I was paying $700 a month rent, and I believe my SSI at the time was $820. So that's what I lived on for 2 years. The second year that I lived there, the heat system failed. and they did not fix it. And the roof failed and they did not fix that. So for about 8 months, I was living without heat and also with rain coming in, mold, breathing issues. I had to be on an inhaler, the whole, like, I don't have asthma, so that was kind of a new thing. And the isolation of COVID, it would make that situation kind of insurmountable. So it took me about 4 months of constantly calling for housing to actually find a placement. Because initially I was told because I was housed, I couldn't get emergency housing. And I was like, but my housing's been condemned. So I'm not sure what to say to you. Like, would you like me to move out and go sleep under a bridge and then I'll call you tomorrow? Sorry, I didn't mean to get some sarcasm.
No apologies.
It was frustrating and it was terrifying.
Yeah.
Frankly. So no heat, I didn't use electricity. I didn't turn lights on because I was really afraid I was going to get electrocuted because that's what the fire marshal told me that couldn't happen. Ended up at the Hilltop. I've been there for a year of contacting being on every list for every house, like looking into. I'm a pretty outside the box thinker because I've had to be throughout my life in order to be able to be okay and for my children to be okay. So I looked into all sorts of things. I'm also on long-term care, Medicaid Choices for Care. So I get 40 some odd hours a week of personal care services, which I need to survive. Which I can't get if I'm living in a tent somewhere. I also need electricity for medical equipment. And I haven't found any. I've worked through Good Sam, I've worked through Capstone, I've worked through Economic Services, I've worked through, I'm gonna lose the names because I do have a head injury, the state, Vermont Housing, whoever does the Section 8. I've done all of Chittenden County's housing lists. I've done all of Washington County housing lists. And I'm not going to have a place to live because I'm disabled. I'm able to stay there until July 1st. Am I saying this right? Yeah.
Thanks, Sharon.
And there's nothing. I have a daughter in the state. She lives in Burlington. She's on the 3rd floor in a walk-up. So it's not really ideal for me. But she would, of course, let me live there. And she would just have to go out and get stuff for me, except that she is on Section 8 as a divorced mom with 2 kids. And that's not allowed. So my staying there would risk her housing, which I won't. And my 2 grandchildren, so I won't do that.
Of course.
I'm up Creek.
Yeah. I really appreciate you sharing your story, Sherry. I really appreciate it.
Okay.
No, and I this is not a role I like right now where I have to pause the story so we can make sure we hear from everyone. But thank you because it illustrates on many different levels how the state policies are failing you. And I'm really sorry for that. And sorry for that as well, Rebecca and Brittany. I want to just pass the mic to you to share. I'll again gently time over here and please, whatever you would like to share with us.
I recently began my homeless experience on the 14th of April. When, sorry.
Oh, please.
You can squeeze it.
Sorry.
Please don't apologize, Brittany.
Okay.
And please take a minute. I'm going to pause. Please take a minute. Your story is important, so we want to make sure you can minute just be in your body. There's no rush. We can be late next door.
On April 14th, we were kicked out of the house we were living in for 3 years. We called 211, got placed in emergency housing that night at the Hilltop, where my experience there was a community pretty immediately. The staff there ensured me I was safe and I was okay. I will be asked to leave at the end of this month because we don't qualify for anything else. Within 2 weeks of being homeless, my fiance and I both started a full-time job. and got a new to us vehicle. We work 40 hours a week and we still don't have money to be able to pay for housing. We also have severe mental health problems and physical problems. With us being on the streets, both our healths will decline and we will not be able to continue working. My fiance has applied for Social Security, but he has been rejected already once. And I was thinking about applying for Social Security, but they told us, because I was just found out, because we won't have a permanent address, we'll be likely denied. So we're asking for just more time, or more of us are gonna die. My fiance is probably gonna be one of them that may die because of his health problems. We have nowhere to go. We will be living in our car at the end of the month.
Thank you, Brittany. Is there more that you want to say? Okay, thank you very much. It is heartbreaking. I mean, that's not even the right word. This is really a tragedy unfolding, and that we really are hoping again with at least this time in this moment, just to figure out what can be done. What should we be doing? So
Give us more time.
yeah, I'm clearly here. Yeah,
Help so many more people.
Yep. More time. Absolutely. I think we've heard that loud and clear.
More time, more money, more respect. Stop treating us like we don't exist and we're useless. And not all of us are criminals. Not all of us are homeless because we're not willing to work and we're just being swept under the rug because people just assume all homeless people are criminals and we're not.
Well, Brittany, we see you, Rebecca, and we see you, Sherry, and we really appreciate your stories. This is incredibly important, that this is the face of what policymaking should be centering, not numbers on a page or giving money to one thing without a question, and then the extra level of scrutiny and dehumanizing nature that this process gives to all of you, versus showing up in both kindness and love and support of what you truly deserve. So with that, I just want to ask my colleagues if there's additional things we want to just have a little bit more time to discuss before we try to find a place to feel we can put a pause for the moment of this conversation. So reflections. Michelle?
Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering, have you guys heard of anybody who knows a place that they're going to be able to transition into well? I mean, it seems like we only hear that there's nothing available, and I'm just wondering, are there any stories of opportunities for places that are accepting folks?
I know I'm on a few waiting lists for housing, but it could be a few weeks, it could be a few months. I've heard up to 6 years. Up to 20 years.
Has there been any kind of suggestion of recommended, like when your date runs out, where are they expecting you to go?
Would you, you're the COC co-chair for Washington County.
Yes.
How long is the wait list for permanent housing in Washington County?
It varies as to who you're asking for permanent housing through, right? So if you're going to Vermont State Housing Authority and you want to be at, say, Dogwood Glen, the wait list might be between 6 months and 18 months, depending on their turnover. You can't guarantee anything. But if you want to be at the Hilltop, which is also a Vermont State Housing Authority property, it could be longer because there's a longer wait list there and folks choose to be on separate wait lists. We're lucky enough, I'm in Washington County, to have other housing providers that are, affordable housing providers, and not every community has several. We have Down Street Housing, we have Barry Housing Authority, there's Montpelier Housing Authority, and there is Highgate and Barry. And so there are other places. That doesn't mean it meets everybody's needs, and they all have pretty lengthy wait lists.
I heard Highgate has a 20-year waiting list. I was living up in Highgate for a little bit. And I applied for housing there and I was denied it. Back to your question, I've been doing the transcribing of letters that I send out to the legislature on behalf of hundreds experiencing homelessness across the state of Vermont. And not one person has told me that they know or have any clue where they're going to be going when everybody's exited from these motels across the state. Not one has any clue.
I've only heard of, since the end of transitional housing at the end of March at the Hilltop, and I've been there, I'm one of the people who've been there the longest. And I'm also kind of the house grandma. So I get a lot of people knocking on my door asking me for, and I used to be an advocate. So they're like, how do I fill out my food stamp form? So I don't have that kind of information, but I do have the, so since March, I know of only one couple who is going to be housed before the end of June. They're both elderly. They were there before me. So I believe that their wait was 15 months. And they weren't on a housing list for one place. One place became open for them. And before March, maybe 3 people. So in the 6 months before that.
Brian, I'm going to have Kathy just speak, and then we'll see if we can end on your comment just for and then we'll. Okay, great.
Yeah, just very quickly, another ask in that letter that came from shelter providers, and I will get a copy and forward it to you. So that you've got it in case you haven't seen it. One of the other asks was to ask the state to reset the clock for emergency housing. That's not in any of the language yet, but if they don't reset the clock and they count what folks have been in for emergency housing up until, say, let's go with June 30th. I know it's May 31st and June 30th. Then folks may not be eligible for any of those 28 to 84 days, depending on the situation, for another year. And that they have not been, I'll just say, I don't believe they've been spending the typical money they would have spent because there has been this VREP funding to be able to utilize. So in my mind, that money should be there to be able to reset that.
Thanks, Kathy.
Reset the clock. Rules need to be expanded also.
Thank you. Brian, let's end on what you want to share.
I just want to say that when we get elected, we take an oath to be guardians of the people and to not be complicit in things that are injurious or harmful. And I just looked in 2017, there was a roadmap to end homelessness. We've failed to follow it. The dynamics have completely changed because of the pandemic. The state did the right thing and it guaranteed people some safety in housing, and to be complicit in mass eviction, I can't do it. So I can't in good conscience go along with this. And I hope we can come up with some way to fight back. That's all.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is yet. I've been thinking and trying to think of different ideas, but I just can't. And I cannot be complicit in this.
So I really want to, this feels so abrupt, but I really want to thank especially our folks, our guests who came in to share your real life experiences are happening right now. It's so incredibly powerful and important. And again, I really want to reiterate that we see you, and at least the House Progressive Caucus is really going to try to figure out a path forward here and not give up. That is, as Brian was just saying, it's in our oath, it's in our shared values as a caucus to roll up our sleeves and try to figure this out. Because we can't leave you in this desperation. It's not humane and it's not right. So we're going to do our best. And again, really want to appreciate our other guest time as well for coming and this discussion. And we'll pause for now, but we really hope to stay in communication and community to figure out what we're going to come up with in the next couple of days here. So thank you very much. With that, we're going to go off live.